All right, I was able to open up the PDF after several tries. So I'm back where I've got the PDF showing on the screen, and we are on the middle of page 330. What we're going to do now for the next 15 minutes, half hour, however long it takes, is finish Chapter 7. And after we do, talk about what your homework will be for Chapter 7. Then we'll see where we are for time, but then we will start on Chapter 8. All right. Now, you will have time today to start working on the homework for Chapter 7. Okay, just so you know that. All right. One of the tags that you have to get used to using, if you look up on the screen here or in your book on the bottom of page 330, is this tag right here. It's a meta tag, so that means it goes in the head section. All right. Name equal viewport, and what that implies is that you are going to be supporting mobile. That's just the implication that's made by this. And this looks a little weird. It says content equal, double quote, width equals, device dash width, comma, initial scale equal 1.0, colon. All right. What it means is when you open this up in whatever device you're using it in, use 100% of the width of the screen. All right. And the initial scale is 100%. 1.0 implies 100%. Now that's explained probably better than I did on page 330 in your book. But also on 331 they have table 7.3, which shows these viewport meta tag directives, and they explain what the stuff in here is. I don't think that you're asked anything on the test as far as that granularity, but you are expected to know what viewport is and what the things in there mean. What you oftentimes use in addition to viewport are what are referred to as CSS3 media queries. All right. Notice here it says, recall from Chapter 5 that the term responsive web design refers to progressively enhancing a web page for different viewing contexts. In other words, responsive web design means that you can take what's shown on the screen and you can vary its size depending on the type of media that you're using to view it. Now, hopefully that just makes sense. All right. So, you will be asked on the next test, what is a media query? That is shown toward the bottom of page 331. All right. A media query is made up of a media type and a logical expression. As I said, it's kind of like programming. We're going to look at some of these right now. So if you look up on the screen, this is taken from page 332 in your book, right near the top of the screen. All right. This says that any device that you're using that has a size basically to it of 480 pixels and less should use this. Now you'll notice it does use pixels here. You go, wait a minute, Jeff, you told us over there don't use pixels. Here we do want an exact unit because the size of my laptop here in pixels is different than the size of my phone in pixels, is different than the size of the Mac that I have at home in pixels, and the tablet, the Android tablet that I have at home in pixels. All right. So it says here, the code sample will direct browsers to an external style sheet that has been configured for display for smartphones. All right. Some of the more often used media types that you're going to see in here are shown in table 7.4. Well, it's on the book here, but I don't even know if it's in your book. It's not really that big a thing. But I do want to mention, because they have it in your book on page 333, it says, what values should I use in my media queries? All right. And no, this is not that it's on a test. but they start giving you a range in here. All right, and if you want to know more, because this is what we're going to be moving into probably already next week, all right, we're going to start talking about Bootstrap, and somewhere in Bootstrap, I'm not sure where, but somewhere in the documentation here, it'll show you different screen sizes and how you should use those. All right, so I'll find that and we will take a look at it. Starter template, global doc type, box sizing, well, we'll find it. All right, turning up to page 334, you will notice that if you want more information than I just gave you, all right, on page 334, the author gives you about a third of the way down some URLs that you can check on about media query breakpoints. And you might say, who gives a darn about media query breakpoints? They're unbelievably important because, you know, they handle different types of phones, different sizes of phones, different types of tablets and sizes of tablets, etc. All right. So there's a hands-on practice for this on 334, 335, and 336 if you want to have a look at that. Again, you are not responsible for doing any of these hands-on practices. You're not turning them in. If you're doing them for your own knowledge. So again, those of you who have said to me, hey, I'm just kind of falling behind in here, I'm having some problems, etc., I'd suggest you go back and you work on the practice exercises. They'll do nothing but help you. All right. On 336, starting on 336, they talk about responsive images. The key thing for responsive images is, everybody see the screen here? Right there. When you start working with max width of 100%, as simple as that sounds, when you say for an image max width equal 100%, you're telling that image to scale based on the type of media that you're using. All right, I don't know if that's on your test or not, but it's still unbelievably important regardless. All right, they do tell you with these flexible image, it says, edit the image elements in the HTML. Remove the height and width. You're doing this if you want this to be able to display on a wide variety of devices. You get rid of the height completely and you replace the width with max width 100%, which tells it to scale. To keep the dimensions of the image in proportion, all right, it says basically they also talk about a height auto that you can use if you're interested in that. Background images, top of 337, can also be configured for a more fluid display at various types of widths. All right, and there's a hands-on practice on pages 337 and 338. And the important part of that, and it's on the screen here also, is this. This is the way that it's going to look, all right, on a desktop right here. This is the way it's going to look on a tablet. You'll notice on the desktop, you've given it a little bit more space, and you can see the background color coming through, whereas with the tablet, you can see a little bit of the background color on the bottom, but it's pretty much lost on the top, left, and right. And when you get to a smartphone, you have no different color. This is quite often how you're going to configure. Notice on the smartphone, all right, the picture basically, other than your main heading, the pictures are all gone. Okay? When we look over here, we've got a 3-column format on the desktop, but it goes down to a 2-column on a tablet. And your navigation goes from being vertical in the desktop to being horizontal on the tablet. You can do all that kind of stuff with media queries. All right, the reason I'm suggesting that you go through and you do this exercise, you will do this for your next hands-on. So I don't want it where it's just so foreign to you that you don't understand it. All right, on the bottom of 338, they talk about the HTML 5.1 picture element. And as it says there, it's new to HTML 5.1. So HTML 5.1 has come out since HTML 5. All right, it's not even in the version that I'm showing on the screen here. This stuff that's on the rest of the page here. So it says the purpose of a picture element is to provide a method for a browser to display different images depending on the size criteria. So if you look on in your book at the hands-on practice, it's on the bottom of 339, you'll notice it's the same image, but the image looks different on a desktop versus a tablet versus a phone. All right, and you can do that by using the picture element. I will tell you, if you look on the top of page 339, they mention that this src set attribute, it's required and it provides image choices for the browser in a comma-separated list. That's on your written test. All right? src set. And I believe also on the bottom of page 338, the source element is a self-contained or void tag used together with the container element. I believe both the source element and the src set, bless you, attribute are on your next test. You want to learn more? You do the hands-on practice on 339 and 340. All right. Other things that you can use in here on page 340 and 341 for responsive image element attributes, they talk about the sizes, which may also be on your written. I don't remember. It informs the browser to process the src set attribute and how much viewport should be used to display it. All right. So 100 would mean 100% type of an idea. Another hands-on practice on 340 and 341. And the author says if you want to know even more about responsive images, she gives you some URLs on the bottom of 341 that you can go in and take a look at. All right. All right, that gets us to page 342, testing mobile display. One way you can test for mobile display, and the cheesiest way to do it, is to do this. And it's not working today, but, well, I know I can do it in IE. All right. Where you come into your browser and you just change the size. All right, that's one way you can do it. It's probably, like I said, probably about the cheesiest or cheapest way of doing it, but it does work if you decide that you want to do it that way. But there are also emulators that you can use. And if you look on the middle of page 342, all right, they show you an Opera emulator, an iPhone emulator, etc. There's even a way, I've got to remember how to do this now because I don't offhand, but if you go into, I'm using Chrome, and that's the one I use. I think that if you click over here where you've got these dots, you click over here, I don't remember how, but it might be under more tools. I don't remember. Developer tools, I don't remember. But there's a way that you can bring it up in here too. If you want to know more about emulators, all right, just go in here and for example, if I wanted to have a Chrome emulator. You see Chrome emulator extension. All right, and they tell you how you can add this. All right, once you do, what you're able to do then is something similar to what's shown in your book on page 342. You can basically do this kind of thing and say, okay, now treat my screen as though it's an iPhone, and you can give it different iPhone sizes, etc. So when you start to create a site, if you want to see what it'll look like, and it's not exact, but it pretty much with an emulator is what it's going to look like on different media. All right. Again, more stuff on browsers on the bottom of 342 and going on to 343. On the middle of page 343, the author says, for serious developers only, you may want to explore SDKs for iOS and Android platforms. You say, I don't know what those are. You don't have to right now, and you don't have to look at them. I will tell you that right now, I believe that since when you came in to the system, you know, coming in this semester or like Colin from last year, that you're going to take the same classes that the second year students are taking now. The reason I'm telling you that is right now in the fourth semester, you take 40 days of Java and 40 days of Android, where I teach you how to write Android apps. That Android may go away. Not for you guys, but for the people who start next fall. All right? I don't think it should, but that's not my decision to make. Okay. All right. Bottom of page 343 and going on to page 344. They talk about what's referred to as mobile first. The idea with mobile first is what you're saying is when you first start to create a website, you create it first for a phone. Why? Because that's the hardest. It's much easier to scale something upward than it is to scale it downward. All right. So mobile first basically implies that you're doing mobile design before you're doing desktop and laptop design. Okay. All right. The last part of the chapter, we're almost there. Starting on page 344 in the last 4 to 6 pages, talks about CSS3 flexible box layout. All right. The idea, and you may or may not have worked with this either on the test or someplace else, but by and large, developers don't like floats. They don't like having to float left, float right, clear a float. It's a pain in the ass. I don't want to do it. So what they've come up with to try to make it easier for you is something that's called Flexbox. And they mention about halfway down on 344. The purpose of Flexbox is to provide a flexible layout. Elements contained within a Flex container can be configured horizontally or vertically in a flexible manner with flexible sizing without having to work with floats. All right? Bless you. So the rest of this chapter talks about how to use Flexbox. You'll notice that they mention halfway down on 344, to configure an area on a web page that uses Flexbox layout, you need to indicate that you're using a Flex container. The stuff you put inside of Flex containers are what are referred to as Flex items. All right? Then you've got a Flex direction property. All right, that basically says how you're going to set stuff up, horizontally or vertically. Then you've got a Flex wrap property that configures whether they're displayed on multiple lines or not. Then you've got a justify content property on 345, which configures how the browser should display extra spacing. Then 345 it says you use the Flex property to customize the size of each Flex item. And on the bottom of the page, it says use the order property to display Flex items. Well, you're like, man, you're whizzing through this very quickly. Well, again, if I come in here and I Google Flexbox, all right, the first thing I find here is this article on CSStricks.com, and it's called A Complete Guide to Flexbox. Anytime you ever read an article about IT that starts with a complete, I think they're full of it, because I don't think that you can write anything that's complete, because as soon as you write something, it's already a little bit out of date. But this is a very good introduction to being able to use and understand what Flexbox is about. I've referenced this before. That's where it is, if you're interested. Now, is there stuff on your test? I'll go back and look, but I don't remember. We're going to go over the test review fairly shortly. All right? And Is there anything with Flexbox on your next written test? I'll have to check, or on your next hands-on, I'll have to check that too. All right, my guess is probably no, but I don't know for sure. All right. The other thing that you can do if you want to know more about Flexbox is notice the second thing that's in here. W3 Schools has got a thing on Flexbox. So they walk you through like a mini tutorial on it. And if you still want more, all right, someplace in here, there it is, you can go out to w3c.org or w3.org and you can find all of their written documentation on Flexbox. So there's a hands-on practice that uses Flexbox on 346, 347, and 348. All right?